In this series from BrainSparks.ca, talk about workplace bias, how to recognize, address, and lead through bias. So, as an introduction, we know that bias exists in every workplace, whether we recognize it or not. Our decisions, interactions, and even our professional cultures are influenced by the mental shortcuts and assumptions we all make. Bias is not always intentional or malicious. Often it operates quietly in the background of our thinking, shaped by past experiences, cultural norms, or group dynamics. However, if left unchecked, bias can limit innovation, erode trust, weaken teams, and lead to poor decisions that affect individuals and organizations alike. This guide is written for students, professionals, and leaders who want to better understand how bias functions in workplace settings and develop practical skills to address it. It explores both conscious and unconscious biases, as well as specific cognitive biases that frequently arise in the course of work, such as confirmation bias, conformity bias, authority bias, groupthink, group shift, and similarity bias, among others. These episodes will move beyond theory to focus on real world strategies for identifying and responding to bias. Readers or viewers will learn how to recognize bias within themselves, within teams, and within larger organizational systems through a combination of self reflection prompts, critical thinking exercises, group activities, language tools. This series equips viewers with practical ways to disrupt bias in the moment, foster more inclusive conversations, and support better decision making processes. For those in leadership roles, this series also provides insights into how to model bias aware leadership, facilitate healthier team dynamics, and embed bias reduction practices into policies and operations. Leaders play a crucial role in setting the tone for open dialogue, encouraging diverse viewpoints, and creating psychological safety where differing perspectives can thrive. Throughout this series, viewers will find templates, worksheets, and checklists that can be directly applied in meetings, hiring processes, project work, and everyday interactions. These are on our website for your reference. The goal is not to eliminate bias entirely, which is neither realistic nor possible, but rather to build ongoing awareness. By investing in these skills, individuals and organizations can unlock stronger collaboration, richer innovation, and more ethical, balanced decision making. The series serves as a practical resource for anyone seeking to lead and contribute with greater clarity, fairness, and critical thinking. So you'll note that I referred to a written guide. This was based on a course that we had built. So these videos are directly related to that. Let's talk more about why bias matters at work. You may not always see it, but bias is in the room. It is in how we hire, how we promote, how we listen, how we make decisions, and how we work together. Bias is not simply an issue for other people. Every single one of us carries biases, both conscious and unconscious, shaped by our experiences, values, backgrounds, and the shortcuts our brains use to process information quickly. In many cases, bias is not about ill intent, but about limited perspective. In the workplace, bias can have serious consequences. It can prevent good ideas from being heard, discourage people from contributing fully, undermine collaboration, and lead to decisions that are less effective, less inclusive, and sometimes even harmful. For leaders, professionals, and students alike, learning to recognize, address, and manage bias is not just an exercise in fairness, it is a critical skill for making better decisions, building stronger teams, and creating workplaces where people can do their best work. This series is designed to be practical. It is not a lecture on diversity, nor is it a guilt trip about human imperfection. Instead, it offers clear, actionable tools that you can use to develop greater awareness of bias in yourself and others, and when to intervene and how to intervene. You can improve the conversations, decision making, and team performance. You will learn about common forms of cognitive and social bias that show up at work, from confirmation and conformity bias to authority bias and groupthink. You will also gain access to reflection prompts, critical thinking exercises, team activities, and language tools you can use in real time. For those in leadership roles, this series offers specific strategies to create environments where bias is less likely to flourish. Leaders play a critical role in setting the tone, encouraging diverse viewpoints, and modeling humility and curiosity. But everyone, no matter their role or title, has a responsibility to contribute to a more thoughtful and inclusive work environment. Bias will never fully go away, but it can be managed. With practice, awareness, and the right tools, we can catch bias sooner, question our assumptions, and create a space for more voices, better thinking, and stronger outcomes. So, what are the foundations of bias? We like to believe we are rational, objective, fair minded, but in reality, much of our thinking operates on autopilot. Every day, we make countless decisions and judgments, often in seconds. Our brains, efficient as they are, rely on mental shortcuts called heuristics to help us navigate the overwhelming amount of information we encounter. These shortcuts are useful, but they also open the door to bias. So, what is bias? Bias is a systemic error in thinking that affects the decisions and judgments we make. Sometimes bias is conscious. We may prefer certain people, ideas, or approaches based on personal values, loyalties, or preferences. More often, though, bias operates unconsciously, shaping our behavior without our awareness. Cognitive bias refers specifically to the mental shortcuts that distort how we process information, evaluate evidence, and reach conclusions. These biases affect everyone, no matter how intelligent, educated, or well meaning. They are not a sign of bad character, but rather a feature of how the human brain works. We are all vulnerable. Bias emerges from several sources. We may face more information that we can fully process. Strong emotions can cloud objective reasoning. The desire to fit in with a group can influence our views. Past experiences shape what we notice and how we interpret it. Societal expectations inform us what we consider normal or appropriate. Because bias is often invisible to us, we may strongly believe we are being fair, even while acting in biased ways. This creates blind spots that can affect hiring, evaluations, leadership decisions, collaboration, and team dynamics. There are consequences of bias at work. Unchecked bias can have wide reaching effects in the workplace. Poor decision making based on flawed or incomplete information, exclusive exclusion of diverse perspective and voices, reinforcement of stereotypes or inequities, loss of trust within teams, reduced innovation due to limited thinking, legal and reputational risks for organizations. So, recognizing bias is not about eliminating every trace of it, which is impossible. Instead, the goal is to develop skills to spot bias sooner, slow down when necessary, and apply structured thinking tools to reduce its influence. So think back to a recent situation at work or school where you made a quick decision or judgment and ask yourself, what assumptions did I make? Did I consider multiple perspectives? Was there any information I ignored or discounted? How might someone with a different background than me have seen the situation? Looking ahead in the upcoming episodes, we will explore the most common forms of bias that show up in professional settings. You'll learn how to identify these, use simple language tools to address them, and develop personal and group strategies to improve decision making and leadership effectiveness. Bias is part of being human. Learning how to work with it rather than be controlled by it is a skill you can strengthen with practice. Biases in the workplace. Bias is not a single thing. It comes in many forms, some obvious and some subtle. In the workplace, a handful of biases tend to show up over and over again. These can influence how we hire, promote, assign work, make decisions, and interact with others. In this episode, we will look at some of the most common workplace biases, explain how they operate, and offer practical examples. Example one is confirmation bias. This is the one of the most powerful and widespread biases. Confirmation bias is our tendency to seek information that supports what we already believe and to ignore or dismiss information that challenges our views. So, for example, a manager believes one employee is a top performer. They notice every success that reinforces this view, but overlooks their mistakes or weaknesses. The reverse can also happen when someone has a negative impression of a colleague or one of their direct reports. Number two is conformity bias. We often feel pressure to go along with the group even when we have doubts. Conformity bias leads us to align with the majority to avoid standing out or causing conflict. For example, in a meeting, most team members support a risky project, but you have concerns and you hesitate to speak up because everyone else seems enthusiastic. Number three is authority bias. We tend to place more weight on the opinions of people in positions of authority or expertise, even when they may be wrong. For example, a senior executive endorses a new marketing strategy. New team members question it despite evidence that the plan may not work. Number four is groupthink. Groupthink occurs when the desire for harmony and consensus prevents people from raising objections or exploring alternative ideas. The group becomes more concerned with agreement than with critical evaluation. For example, a leadership team approves a merger without fully assessing the risks because everyone wants to appear united and positive. Number five is group shift. Group shift refers to the tendency for groups to make extreme decisions than individuals would make on their own, either more risky or more cautious. For example, after initial hesitation, a project team decides to aggressively expand into a new market, encouraged by the group's collective confidence. Number six is similarity bias, also called affinity bias. We naturally feel more comfortable with people who are like us, whether in background, interests, values, or experiences. This can influence hiring, promotions, and team assignments. For example, a manager repeatedly selects candidates who share their alma mater, hobbies, or personal background, unintentionally limiting team diversity. Number seven is the halo effect. The halo effect occurs when we let one positive trait influence our overall perception of someone. For example, a candidate gives a great presentation during an interview. As a result, the hiring panel overlooks concerns about their limited experience. Number eight is anchoring bias. We tend to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, which becomes the anchor when making decisions. For example, in salary negotiations, the first number put on the table strongly influences the final outcome, regardless of market data. Number nine is availability heuristic. We judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind, often influenced by recent news or personal experience. For example, after hearing about a high-profile data breach, a leadership team overestimates the likelihood of cyber attacks while neglecting other pressing risks. Number 10 is status quo bias. People tend to prefer things to stay the same, even when the change might lead to better outcomes. For example, a company continues to use outdated software because it has always worked, despite growing inefficiencies. So, as an example group activity, I've got bias bingo for you to try. Prepare a list of short workplace scenarios involving decisions or conversations. Ask participants to identify which biases might be at play in each example. This simple activity helps build team awareness and see how easily bias can slip into every day. And here are some critical thinking prompts that you can reflect on. Think about a recent workplace decision that you were involved in. Were any of these biases present? Was there pressure to conform? Did authority influence the conversation or decision? Were dissenting opinions encouraged or shut down? In the next episode, we'll focus inward, recognizing bias in others is easier than spotting bias in ourselves. Yet self-awareness is where real progress begins. It is often easier to spot bias in others than in ourselves. We like to believe we make decisions based on facts and fairness. The truth is, every one of us carries blind spots that quietly shape how we perceive people, problems, and situations. If we want to become more effective professionals and leaders, we need to start by looking inward. Our brains are designed to protect our self image. We are wired to believe we are fair and objective. As a result, we may justify decisions that fit our preferences, selectively remember information that supports our views, avoid confronting uncomfortable feedback, minimize or dismiss mistakes to protect our confidence. Becoming aware of our own biases requires honesty, curiosity, and humility. It is not about self blame, but about developing a more accurate understanding of how we think and decide. While everyone's blind spots are unique, some patterns often signal that bias may be influencing your thinking. You feel very confident very quickly. Snap judgments can indicate you are relying on mental shortcuts. You get defensive when challenged. Discomfort may signal attachment to a particular belief or decision. You rely on gut instinct without checking facts. Intuition can be helpful, but it is not always accurate. You frequently say, I just know I'm right. Strong certainty may reflect unexamined assumptions. You notice patterns in who you trust or support. You may unconsciously favor people who resemble you in background, style, or values. Because bias operates automatically, one of the most effective tools is to simply pause. Before making a key decision or reacting strongly, ask yourself, what assumptions am I making right now? Have I gathered enough information? Could there be another valid point of view? Am I being influenced by personal preferences or relationships? What evidence would make me reconsider? Even brief moments of reflection can interrupt biased thinking and create space for more balanced judgments. One of the best ways to counter personal bias is to actively seek perspectives that challenge your own. Surround yourself with people who have different experiences and backgrounds. Ask thoughtful, probing questions. Don't be afraid to disagree with you respectfully. Encouraging diverse viewpoints reduces the chance that your own blind spots will go unexamined. Think of a recent work decision or interaction that felt difficult or emotionally charged. Ask yourself, why did I react that way? Were my emotions driving my judgment? Did I listen carefully to all viewpoints? Was I open to being wrong? If possible, discuss your reflections with a trusted colleague or mentor who can help you explore additional angles. Small habits also build awareness. Bias awareness is not a one time activity. Like any skill, it requires regular practice. Simple habits can help. Keep a decision journal to reflect on important choices, ask feedback from trusted peers, read widely from sources outside of your usual preferences, pay attention to situations that trigger small, strong emotional reactions, practice saying, I might be wrong. In the next episode, we will shift our attention to recognizing bias in others in group settings. Learning to spot bias in teams and meetings is a key skill for anyone who wants to strengthen workplace decision making. Well, self awareness is a critical first step. Much of the bias we encounter at work plays out in group dynamics. Teams, committees, hiring panels, and project groups are all vulnerable to biased thinking, often without anyone realizing it is happening. Recognizing these patterns allows us to intervene constructively and support better decision making. And why group bias is tricky. In groups, bias becomes amplified for several reasons. People want to fit in and avoid conflict. Hierarchies can discourage dissent. Consensus feels safe, even when it may be wrong. Groups often reward harmony over critical thinking. Social pressure leads individuals to withhold doubts or concerns. The combination of these forces can lead even well intentioned teams into poor choices, limited thinking, or avoidable mistakes. There are some common signs of group bias that may be affecting a team or group. Fast agreement. If the group quickly aligns on a decision without exploring alternatives. Silencing of dissent. Individuals who raise concern are dismissed, interrupted, or ignored. Overconfidence. The group shows strong certainty despite limited data or analysis. Authority dominance. The most senior person's opinion drives the outcome. Repetition of the same perspectives. Few, if any, alternative views are introduced. Lack of diversity and participation. Some members speak far more than others, while some say little or nothing. The danger of false consensus. When everyone seems to agree, it can feel like the group is functioning well. In reality, a false consensus may be hiding disagreement, caution, or unspoken concerns. Teams that value true dialogue encourage disagreement, debate, and all the full airing of risks. Who is not in the room? A simple but powerful question to ask: who is missing? Groups often fail to involve people who hold different experiences, expertise, or perspectives. When certain voices are consistently excluded, blind spots multiply. For this self reflection prompt, after your next team meeting, ask yourself the following: who spoke the most? Who spoke the least? Were alternative ideas explored? Did anyone challenge the group's assumptions? Did authority figures speak first or dominate? Were quieter or more junior members encouraged to contribute? There are some simple interventions that can disrupt group bias. You do not need formal authority to help groups avoid bias. Here are some actions anyone can take. Ask open-ended questions. What else might we be missing? Encourage multiple options. Can we generate at least 3 different approaches before deciding? Invite quiet voices. I'd be interested in hearing from those who have not yet spoken. Separate idea generation from evaluation. Brainstorm first, critique later. Create anonymous input opportunities. You can use written submissions or digital tools to gather different perspectives. If you are in a leadership role, you carry additional responsibility. Leaders can model bias-aware behavior by admitting their own uncertainties and blind spots, inviting disagreement and curiosity, delaying their own opinions to hear first from others, rewarding thoughtful challenges rather than punishing dissent. In the next episode, we will turn to practical language and tools you can use in the moment to surface bias without creating defensiveness or conflict. Addressing bias is not about accusation, it is about creating space for better. In this episode, we'll cover language tools for addressing bias in the moment. Recognizing bias is important, but knowing how to address it, especially when you are not the most senior person in the room, can feel much harder. If handled poorly, raising concerns about bias can lead to defensiveness, conflict, or silence. The key is to use language that invites reflection rather than accusation. This episode offers practical phrases and strategies you can use to surface bias, encourage critical thinking, and keep conversations productive. The goal in addressing bias is not to call people out, but to call people in. Most bias operates unconsciously. Blaming or shaming others will only make people defensive and shut down conversation. Instead, we want to open up space for consideration, dialogue, and better thinking. Here are some neutral, low defensiveness phrases you can use when you sense bias, maybe influencing a decision. Can we pause for a moment and explore if we might be missing any perspectives? I wonder if there are assumptions we are making here that we should double check. What would we conclude if we looked at this from a completely different angle? Are there any risks if we all agree too quickly on this? Is there a voice or stakeholder we have not heard from yet? Sometimes it helps to widen the frame of discussion. How might someone from a different background view this situation? If we were advising another team facing this, what would we suggest they watch out for? What evidence would make us reconsider our position? If we imagined ourselves 6 months from now, what might we wish we had done differently? To create psychological safety in the group, leaders and participants alike can set a tone where bias can be discussed safely. Some phrases such as, all ideas are welcome here, disagreements help make us strong decisions, it is okay to challenge assumptions, this is how we learn, we may not get this perfect, let's be open to seeing where this might have blind spots. In one-on-one conversations, you can try, I noticed that we may have favored candidates with very similar backgrounds. You think there might be an opportunity to broaden our pool? For team discussions, I appreciate we are moving too quickly. I wonder if it might be worth stepping back and making sure we are not missing potential risks or alternative viewpoints. In a leadership setting, before I share my view, I'd like to hear from others first. I want to make sure we're all hearing a range of perspectives. You can also role play. Imagine this situation. A senior leader strongly supports one vendor proposal. The rest of the team is silent. One possible intervention may be, that's a helpful recommendation. Before we finalize, could we review a few alternative options as well? It may help us feel more confident that we've fully vetted our choices. The first few times you try these phrases, it might feel awkward. Over time, though, you will develop confidence in using respectful language to invite better thinking. You can even create your own phrases that work better for you in your situations. Many people will actually welcome your prompts as they often sense the same concerns but are unsure how to raise them. Remember, your goal is not to win an argument. Your goal is to strengthen the quality of thinking in the room. In the next episode, we will explore how to build team processes and meeting structures that make it easier to catch bias early and encourage more thoughtful decision making. In this episode, we'll discuss facilitating bias-smart group decision making. Even the most skilled individuals struggle to overcome bias when decisions are made in groups. Social dynamics, time pressures, and unconscious habits can easily steer teams towards decisions that feel comfortable but fail to challenge assumptions. Fortunately, there are simple, practical methods that leaders and teams can use to create structures that reduce bias and improve decision quality. Bias thrives in unstructured discussions. When conversations are casual or loosely managed, dominant voices take over, quieter perspectives get lost, and familiar solutions are chosen. Structured decision making creates space for multiple viewpoints, balanced participation, systemic evaluation of options, reduced pressure to conform. You do not need complicated processes to make a difference. Small shifts in how you run meetings and make decisions can dramatically improve outcomes. Here are some practical techniques you can apply to directly structure group discussions. Number one, the devil's advocate rotation. Assign one person the role of devil's advocate in each meeting. Their job is to respectfully challenge assumptions, point out risks, and explore alternative viewpoints. Rotate this role regularly so everyone gains experience in questioning group thinking. Here's an example phrase. Let me play devil's advocate for a moment. What might we not be seeing? Personally, that's my favorite. Number two, anonymous input rounds. Use anonymous surveys, digital tools, or written submissions to gather input before discussions begin. This allows people to share honest views with the fear of judgment, especially if they disagree with the majority opinions. Number three, pre-mortem exercises. Before finalizing a decision, ask the group to imagine the project that has failed. Then discuss what might have caused that failure. This helps surface risks that may not have even been fully considered. A possible prompt. Imagine it's 1 year from now and this plan has failed. What went wrong? Number four is idea generation before evaluation. Separate brainstorming from the activity of analysis. Start by generating a wide list of options without critique. Once a full list is developed, move into evaluation and decision making. Number five, multiple options. Require the group to develop at least 3 distinct options before choosing a course of action. This forces broader exploration and prevents premature commitment to one solution. I've also seen this as status quo versus option A and option B, or do nothing. You can expand on that. Number six, who else should we involve? Pause during planning to ask who else might bring valuable insights. This encourages inclusion of diverse voices early in the process. At your next team meeting, appoint one participant as the bias observer. Their role is to note any moments where the group rushes to agreement, dissenting voices are minimized, authority drives decisions, similarity bias influences choices. Now review these observations as a group afterwards to build awareness and improve future discussions. For these practices to work, they must become part of team culture, not one-time interventions. Leaders and team members should remember to normalize critical questioning, encourage balanced participation, value disagreement as a path to stronger outcomes, share responsibility for monitoring group dynamics. So when the teams build these habits, decision making becomes not only smarter, but also more inclusive, resilient, and innovative. In the next episode, we'll focus on how individuals and organizations can build personal and systemic habits that support ongoing bias, awareness, and improvement. In this episode, we'll talk about building personal and organizational habits. Recognizing and addressing bias is not a one-time task. Bias management is an ongoing practice that requires attention, humility, and commitment. Without intentional habits, even well-trained individuals and well-meaning organizations can easily slip back into old patterns. The good news is that simple, consistent habits can make bias awareness part of everyday work. Each of us can build routines that help us spot and interrupt our own biases before they shape our decisions. Number one, use a decision journal. When faced with important choices, jot down the following. What decision are you making? What assumptions are you making? What evidence are you relying on? And what alternatives could you have considered? Review your journal over time and look for personal patterns and blind spots. Number two, ask for regular feedback. Invited trusted colleague or mentor to share their observations about how you handle disagreement, evaluate information, and include others. Honest feedback helps us uncover what we might not see in ourselves. Number three, read and listen. Expose yourself to ideas, voices, and experiences outside your usual circles. Broadens your perspective and challenges narrow assumptions. Number four, slow down. When you feel highly confident or emotionally charged, just pause. Use the pause and check method to reflect before acting. I personally like to sleep on big decisions or get feedback from another friend or colleague. Number five, practice intellectual humility. Get comfortable saying, I might be wrong. That's a good point. Haven't considered that. Let's get a bit more information. Humility invites better thinking both in yourself and others. While individual habits matter, organizational structures have even more power to either reinforce or interrupt bias across teams, hiring, promotions, and decision making. Diversity is one of the strongest natural antidotes to group bias. Ensure teams include people with different backgrounds, experiences, education, and perspectives. This creates built in checks on groupthink and similarity bias. Use structured decision making processes and adopt group protocols such as devil's advocate rotations, multiple option development, pre-mortems and post-mortems, and anonymous input tools. Formal structures can make it easier to catch bias before final decisions are made. Create psychological safety by encouraging open dialogue. Model vulnerability, reward dissenting respectfully offered, and protect people who raise uncomfortable questions. When people feel safe to speak up, bias is more likely to be surfaced and addressed. Audit key processes such as hiring, promotion, and evaluation systems regularly. Ask yourself, where might bias be entering into this process? Are we relying on gut feeling too heavily? Are we valuing diversity of thought and experience? We need to train our managers and leaders as well. Leadership training should include not only bias awareness, but also concrete tools for managing bias in team dynamics, meetings, and decision making. Leaders set the tone for what is acceptable and encouraged. We have a little self assessment question checklist that you can use as a personal reflection tool. Ask yourself, do I regularly consider perspectives different from my own? Am I open to being challenged without becoming defensive? Do I seek feedback on my decisions? Do I notice patterns in who I favor or listen to most? Do I slow down important decisions to reflect before acting? Goal is not perfection, but progress. Small repeated actions compound over time to build stronger habits and healthier work cultures. In the next episode, we will turn our focus specifically to leadership. Leaders carry special responsibility for modeling bias-aware behavior and creating environments where better thinking can thrive. In this episode, we'll talk about leadership responsibilities and managing bias. Leaders set the tone for how bias is addressed in any workplace. While every employee plays a role in managing bias, leaders have a greater influence because of their authority, visibility, and impact on team culture. When leaders actively work to recognize and disrupt bias, they create healthier teams, better decisions, and stronger outcomes. When they ignore it, bias quietly embeds itself into daily practices, often unnoticed until real harm is done. Leadership shapes bias in several ways. Their words carry more weight and can anchor team thinking. Their behavior signals what is acceptable or unacceptable. Their openness to challenge influences whether others feel safe to speak up. Their decisions shape hiring, promotion, and resource allocation. Because of this influence, leaders must hold themselves to a higher standard of self-awareness and bias management. It is important to lead with humility and curiosity. One of the most powerful ways leaders can address bias is by modeling humility. Leaders who are willing to say, I may not have the full picture, give permission for others to contribute differing viewpoints. Curiosity helps leaders uncover blind spots by actively seeking diverse perspectives. Before major decisions, leaders should ask themselves, have I heard from people with differing views? Am I unconsciously favoring people who agree with me? Is my position limiting open discussion? Have I invited others to challenge my thinking? Psychological safety is the foundation for bias-aware teams. Leaders can create psychological safety when they welcome disagreement, do not punish it. They treat mistakes as learning opportunities. They value contributions from all levels. They invite those that are quiet to speak up. Without psychological safety, even well-trained teams will hesitate to raise concerns about bias. There are some deliberate leadership practices that can reduce bias. Number one, speak last whenever possible. Leaders who state their opinion first risk anchoring the discussion. By waiting to speak, leaders encourage others to offer unfiltered views. Number two, reward constructive dissent. When team members challenge ideas respectfully, acknowledge and thank them. This builds confidence from others to do the same. Number three, formalize decision-making structures. Use structured processes like devil's advocate roles, pre and post-mortem exercises, anonymous input rounds, and multiple option development. These approaches help surface concerns that might otherwise remain hidden. Number four, build diverse leadership teams. Surround yourself with people who bring different experiences, perspectives, and expertise. Diversity at leadership level strengthens decision-making and reduces blind spots. Number five, audit the leadership pipeline. Review promotion, hiring, and development systems for potential bias. Ensure that criteria are clear, consistently applied, and inclusive of varied career paths and leadership styles. Leadership is a skill, not a trait. Effective leadership in managing bias is not about perfection or innate talent. It is a skill that can be learned and strengthened with practice. Practice continuous self-reflection, feedback from trusted peers, commitment to inclusive practices, openness to learning from mistakes. The cost of inaction is when leaders fail to manage bias, but the risk grows over time. Poor decisions become patterns, talent is overlooked or excluded, innovation suffers from limited thinking, trust erodes among team members, reputation and legal exposure increase. In contrast, leaders who actively engage with bias create workplaces where better thinking, stronger performance, and healthier cultures can thrive. In the next episode, we will examine the very real risks that arise when bias goes unchecked in the workplace and why these issues deserve serious attention from both leaders and teams. In this episode, we'll talk about what happens when bias goes unchecked, the risks and the consequences. Bias is not just an abstract concept. It has real and measurable consequences for individuals, teams, and entire organizations. While some bias may seem minor in the moment, the long-term effects of repeated bias can accumulate into serious problems that damage performance, trust, and reputation. In this episode, we will examine what happens when bias is not actively managed and why even small, unnoticed biases deserve our attention. Number one, poor decision-making. At its core, bias leads to flawed decisions. When teams ignore diverse viewpoints, overvalue authority, or dismiss alternative options, they make choices based on incomplete or distorted information. The result is missed opportunities, unnecessary risks, inefficient use of resources, and short-term thinking that sacrifices long-term sustainability. Organizations that fail to challenge their assumptions may continue investing in failing projects, overlook emerging threats, or fall behind competitors who think more broadly. Number two, the exclusion of talent. Bias often shows up in hiring, promotions, and talent development. When similarity bias, affinity bias, or stereotypes influence these processes, qualified individuals are overlooked. This can result in a less diverse workforce, underutilized skills and perspectives, lower morale among employees who feel undervalued, and reduced access to fresh ideas and innovation. Over time, organizations lose the competitive advantage that comes from fully leveraging the capabilities of all of their people. Number three, erosion of trust and engagement. When employees see bias influencing decision, trust suffers. Team members may begin to believe that favoritism matters more than merit. Speaking up carries personal risk. Certain voices are always privileged, and opportunities are not fairly distributed. This can lead to disengagement, low retention, and a workplace culture where people stop contributing their best ideas. Number four, weakened innovation. Innovation depends on exploring new ideas, challenging the status quo, and integrating diverse perspectives. When bias limits who participates in conversations or narrows the range of acceptable ideas, organizations lose their creative edge. Groupthink, conformity, and the suppression of dissent all prevent organizations from adapting to change or developing new solutions to complex problems. Number five, ethical and legal risks. Unchecked bias can also result in discriminatory practices, unfair hiring and promotion processes, biased evaluations and compensation decisions, legal challenges related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, damage to brand reputation if unfair practices become public. In some cases, organizations may face regulatory investigations, lawsuits, or public backlash that have had serious financial and operational consequences. Number 6, compounding effects over time. Perhaps the single greatest danger of bias is how quietly it compounds. A single bias decision may seem small, but repeated over months and years, these decisions shape who leadership becomes and who holds those leadership positions, which projects are funded, whose voices carry weight, how customers and stakeholders are served. By the time problems become visible, deeply entrenched patterns may be difficult and costly to reverse. Consider a company that consistently promotes leaders who match a narrow leadership style. Over time, team diversity decreases, innovation slows, employee engagement drops, customer needs are poorly understood, and competitors outpace the company in adapting to new markets. Eventually, the organization faces not only cultural challenges, but serious business performance declines that threaten its survival. There is a cost of doing nothing. The greatest cost of bias is often hidden. Organizations that fail to act may appear stable for a time, but under the surface, talent is wasted, opportunities are missed, and decisions grow weaker. Once performance problems surface, the root causes may be traced back to years of small, unaddressed biases. In the next episode, we'll focus on what it means to treat bias management as a lifelong practice and how individuals and teams can stay committed to this work over time. Bias work is never finished. It is not something you fix once and move on. Bias is part of how the brain operates. And because of that, it requires ongoing attention, humility, and practice. The goal is not perfection, but steady progress. As individuals, professionals, students, and leaders, our responsibility is to stay curious, open, and willing to challenge both our own thinking and the systems around us. When we approach bias work as a continuous journey, we create workplaces that are stronger, fair, and better equipped to meet the challenges of a complex world. Bias will always be present. Even with training, awareness, and good intentions, bias will continue to show up. New situations, new team members, and new decisions all create opportunities for bias to sneak back in. It's not a failure, it is a reminder that diligence is always needed. Rather than striving for a bias free workplace, aim for a workplace where bias is recognized earlier, discussed openly, addressed thoughtfully, and managed constructively. Stay humble, stay curious. The most effective people in bias work share two qualities: humility and curiosity. They do not need to assume they have it all figured out. Instead, they remain open to feedback, seek out different perspectives, and welcome being challenged. They treat every conversation as an opportunity to learn something new. We build habits, not one time events. Bias training is helpful, but without regular practice, awareness fades. Build small, sustainable habits by using decision journals, schedule regular process audits, encourage bias observers in team meetings, create feedback loops with trusted colleagues, review outcomes and decisions periodically to check for unintended patterns, and lead by example. For leaders, this work is especially important. Your willingness to admit uncertainty, invite disagreement, and model reflective decision making gives others permission to do the same. When leaders demonstrate bias-aware thinking, it sets a powerful cultural tone that encourages honesty, trust, and continuous improvement. One of the best ways to sustain bias awareness is through peer support. Find trusted colleagues who are also committed to this. Check in regularly, share challenges, and hold each other accountable. Having allies helps normalize bias conversations and keeps the work alive. Celebrate progress. Bias is often framed as a problem to solve, but is equally important to celebrate growth. Teams that now have broader participation, hiring processes that attract more diverse candidates, decisions that reflect more thoughtful evaluation, leaders who create safer, more inclusive discussions. Recognizing these wins reinforces the value of the effort and motivates continued improvement. Think about the bigger picture. At its heart, bias work is not just about fairness or compliance. It is about better thinking. When we broaden our perspectives, challenge assumptions, and invite diverse viewpoints, we make stronger decisions. We serve customers, employees, and communities more effectively. We create workplaces where people can thrive. As you continue on your bias journey, carry these questions with you. What am I not seeing? Who is missing from this conversation? What evidence would change my mind? How can I create space for others to speak? Where can we build stronger habits together? So I encourage you to stay humble, stay curious, and keep learning.